I got a pair of Jinko jeans. Let's see how much we can fit in these back pockets. Discman and headphones. Teen People magazine from 2000. My entire Pogs collection. VTech, cordless. Pyramid CD. Goosebumps book. Lisa Frank notebook. Billboard Dad on VHS. Model Behavior on Blu-ray. My Dear Diary. Conair Quick Braid. Yak Back. Bedazzled T-Mobile Sidekick. Coolpix camera. Love Spell. iZone camera. Beanie Baby. Bubble Beeper gum. Tamagotchi. Sand art. This thing. Body glitter. Bath and Body Works art stuff. Dream Atmos. iPod. Baby G Watch. Bop It. This thing. A yo-yo. A lava lamp.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another brand new episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Anthony. Definitely not in the Epstein Files Maddox.
I haven't checked. But
I did check.
I would. Wow,
You're not in there.
How crazy would that be?
Well, he was, subscribed to a lot of weird, email newsletters and stuff, and so a lot of, names will come up, and then you realize,
Sure.
okay,
Yeah.
it's just that, so-and-so was mentioned in a newsletter or something.
I assume he was not a listener to Lucky Paper Radio. Did you
As best
check
I
that?
can tell, was not subscribed to our newsletter.
Are there any mentions of Magic the Gathering?
Oh, I didn't check that.
Interesting. All right, we got to do a live check.
It's not super fast to do a live check, but let's see. Let's see here. Because the thing is, there's this big project that is basically pulling out all the people, organizations, locations, and documents that are in the giant dump. And so if that's not a thing they have previously identified, then you can't just do a plain text search, at least not that I'm aware of, just the entire dump easily. So I don't know.
We'll have to find
Great
out.
question. Listeners, write in. Is Magic the Gathering in the Epstein Files? While you're at it, look up, your favorite celebrities, your favorite billionaires, government representatives, various
check it out.
world leaders.
See what's going on in there.
Just check it out and, inform yourself. Stay informed. Is that going to get us, demonetized on a bunch of platforms?
Probably.
Yeah, it's
I would assume so.
Whatever. Who cares?
You're not allowed to question leaders anymore. That's not okay. We've banned that.
I'm just saying look them up. And
just
then
look them up.
Maybe do
Be
something.
informed.
Do something. We're not talking about that on this episode or any episode of Lucky Paper Radio. Instead, Anthony, I have a little topic prepared, and I have a very simple question for you, and I'm curious to hear what your answer is.
Okay, I'm prepared.
How many themes, packages, whatever you want to call it, do you think you can fit in a cube?
16?
All right, you heard it here first.
You're right.
16
You're right. This
themes.
is a little topic. We've solved that answer. Is this not a topic we've talked about? Because I think
sure not.
I think that this is a question that I often hear new cube designers asking, and there's
You hear people asking how many they can fit in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that this question kind of has maybe two ways you could look at it. One is, and maybe the more common way to ask it is, how many cards does it take to make a particular archetype or a particular strategy or deck theme in a cube? And, the flip side of that is, okay, well, if it takes so many cards, that means I can fit this many into 360 cards or whatever. And the answer I always have for people is that's not really an answerable question because it takes a totally different number of cards depending on what that theme is. Mm-hmm. So easy examples are mono red aggro. You probably need and we did talk about this a little bit on the episode with Lords of Limited, but imagine here's your ideal version of what that mono red aggro deck is. It needs, let's just say 8 1-drops and 12 2-drops, something like that. And those cards might not fit as well into other archetypes. They might be really just focused to that one particular deck. And in that case, you need all 20 of those. Plus, you need more than that because there's some randomness in the draft. If you expect a player to have a certain number, you're going to need to, do 1.5 that many.
What percentage of this podcast do you think is us just talking about language?
Most of it. I mean, I think that's the explicit point of this podcast is we're using Magic the Gathering to talk about other stuff we find more interesting, right?
Yeah, because what I would say is that I do not mean mono red aggro when I say a theme or a package.
Interesting. Okay, well, the other theme that I was going to throw is the other side of that spectrum is opposition. You just put opposition in a cube, and it's like now you have an opposition deck that needs just a bunch of cards that are much more flexible. So that would be my initial point. Is just like it really depends on what that theme is, because it could just be 2 or 3 cards, or it could be 25 cards that you need.
It's funny because your both examples are neither things I would call themes or packages.
Okay,
like,
so
like you're right. Opposition is just a card that you can put in almost any cube with a reasonable number of creatures, and you now have a deck that you can build around it. But I still wouldn't call that a like theme or package.
All right, you have some better examples?
Well, yeah. So just to sort of unpack why those examples don't work. So for me, at least from my definitions,
You're asking the question, so you're allowed to define the terms.
like it's just a little petty payback from last week when I.
No.
So like a mono red aggro deck, I think could have themes or packages within it, right? You could have a mono red aggro deck with an equipment theme, right?
Sure, yeah.
Or you could have a mono red aggro deck with like a spell slinger theme, or you could have a mono red aggro deck with a like sort of Punisher, like Zozu the Punisher, Ankh of Mishra theme, right? Where it's about sort of attrition over time. But to me, like the overall macro strategy of like be aggressive and, you know, the color identity, play mono red, like those things are orthogonal to a theme. You could also have a cube that really strives to minimize themes as much as possible and, you know, doesn't really have any themes. You're just like, your mono red deck is just a curve of creatures and you're just playing them and attacking, and like that's what your quote unquote theme is. But there's not really any synergistic or strategic connections between the cards other than just, you know, your opponent's life total going down.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, I do agree that, yeah, we talk about it in terms of macro archetypes, because these are the kind of like big blocks. It's like we can kind of think of a meta game as having, you know, fast decks, slow decks, medium decks, like 3 or 4 categories. But then, yeah, within that, we have sort of these like fractal nuances of different levels of synergies and strategies.
Similarly, when I think about opposition, it's, like we said, kind of one card that can definitely change the texture of a whole deck, right? Like you can have a deck that, especially if you have a cube that has tutors or, you know, recursion, ways to like recur an important piece, like your entire strategy can shift from I'm a, you know, blue-green creature deck that's going to be just attacking and curving out to I'm a resource denial deck with like one card. And like that's a very cool category of cards that can completely turn your entire deck on like a dime and change its strategy just by, you know, one single card's addition or presence. But to me, like, that's not really a theme because it's literally only one card. Like, it can't be a package of cards because it's literally one card, right? It just only does one thing. So that's also a very sort of cool cube design tool, but not really what I'm talking about. What I more mean is, like, I see this most often from newer cube designers when they say, like, what are my 10 2-color pairs going to do? I need, like, 10 themes, and my themes are going to be +1/+1 counters, and, like, blinking my own stuff, like self-blink, or it's going to be red-black sacrifice, right? Like, that's what I think about when I think about a theme, and I've always really resonated with your approach in the regular cube and how you describe your approach to themes, not as being, well, I have 10 2-color themes, but instead being like, no, I have a bunch of little things just kind of sprinkled throughout. Mm-hmm. And you've said before, I've heard you say before that, like, you kind of, relative to maybe most cube designers that might think about their cube in terms of like 10 2-color pairs a la Retail Limited, you kind of undersupport those themes. You're like, I don't have enough here for a whole deck that is like one thing. Like, you're not going to be just doing one thing. You're going to be doing a couple of things, but there's still very clearly themes in the regular cube.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, on one hand, I totally agree with you and see what you're saying, but often when I see people design those sort of like, here's my 10 archetypes, I do see like the macro archetypes being presented in the same way. So they'll say like, oh, well, Boros is aggro, or blue-black is control, or red-green is stompy, and I'll see those next to +1/+1 counters and a creature type matters. Like, do you think that's a mistake to be comparing those things?
I do think it's a little bit weird. Like, honestly, no, I think that is a testament to the imprecision of trying to make every 2-color pair do like one thing.
Right. It's like, oh, I just need this catch-all. Like, I can't fit enough cards that literally say -1/-1 counter to make this particular like explicit strategy make sense.
Right.
So,
yeah. Or you want a control
just
deck
gonna
and
be
like
controlling.
Yeah, exactly. And what is the control theme? I mean, you can have themes in control for sure, but usually people just mean like, well, I have counter spells and removal and card draw, you know, and like that doesn't really have the same sort of printed on the card mechanical theme as modified or ninjas or something.
Yeah, and I think you're right that these are kind of, in many cases, kind of orthogonal metrics of like looking at a cube environment, because you can absolutely have a cube where it's like, here's Lightning Bolt. This is a perfect card for both the aggro deck, but it's also supporting a little bit of a Spells Matters deck, and that Spells Matters deck could also be an aggro deck, or it could be a more controlling. Like, there's lots of different ways for that kind of explicit synergy to manifest.
For sure. I think there's a lot of overlap too. Like you mentioned earlier, like, okay, well, how many cards does it take to make a theme? Then you divide 360, you know, minus however many lands you want by that and say, well, that's how many themes you can fit. But I think realistically, you should strive for, and also naturally it will happen, that you'll have tons of overlap in cards that can fit into multiple themes.
Right.
And so Yeah, it's kind of a complicated question. I made a little list here just of like themes I can see in the regular cube, not a comprehensive list, but I think it's interesting to kind of just take a survey of these. The first one I thought about was heroic / targeting your own creatures with stuff. Spells like Arc Lightning fit into this, which is just a generically good removal spell, but also has fringe applications if you have certain heroic creatures. Artifacts and historic matters is definitely a theme of the regular cube. Zombies is a theme. You have cards that care about the zombie type line. You definitely have Spellslinger payoffs like, Young Pyromancer and Murmuring Mystic and stuff like that. I would say you have like a playing at instant speed theme, like a flash theme a little bit. You have a couple of flash creatures and a couple of other things that grant flash to things you're casting, which feels like it's, kind of thematic enough that it's becoming thematic. Getting a little more sort of narrow, you sort of have recently, I say recently, the most recent change you made to the regular cube.
Recent in, the graded on a curve timescale.
In the relative timescale of the regular cube, you somewhat recently have introduced like a curiosity theme to especially like the blue-green sort of combinations. You have a couple of auras that, allow you to draw a card when you damage to your opponent and payoffs for those. You have like a little keyword abilities matter theme, it feels like. I mean, even if it's just Thunderous Orator and Swiftblade Vindicator, like that starts to almost feel like a little tiny little package, right? Like I think that's what you mean when you say tiny little package of like these cards work in multiple applications, but like they resonate together and feel like they form a little package.
To me, that like overlaps really well with like equipment and pump spells. It's like, we can have this thing that is sometimes more focused about keywords matter, but it bleeds into those other kind of explicit synergies.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say, for example, you have an equipment theme. You do have equipment in the cube, but it doesn't feel like there are explicit payoffs for equipment, say for maybe one, which is Bear Dargavian Recruiter, which is a famously cool card because it's a payoff for everything.
Well-known cool card.
Well, it's just like, it's such a great way to like connect a bunch of disparate themes. Like, you don't have almost anything that cares about equipment, like the card type or whatever, but you have Baird and you have some things, like you said, with like good keyword abilities. But like, would you identify that as a theme? Would you say you have like an equipment theme? It feels to me like not quite, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say maybe it's more like I like the terminology. Again, we're just going to talk about terminology. The terminology of like explicit themes versus emergent themes. Explicit being put an equipment on me and I'll reward you, and emergent being more like aggro.
Explicit as far as the like card text, not as you, the cube designer.
Yeah, but there's also this kind of implicit versus emergent patterns as the cube designer, because I think I was thinking more of just like kind of like what you're describing, like, oh, okay, here are the cards they already have. Does Baird fit into this? And yes, not only does it make some of these equipment more appealing, it also makes the kind of like living weapon type, like, what is the sword that's basically a 2/2, but then you can re-equip. Like, it makes all these other cards just a little bit more appealing. And that's kind of interesting to think about, the payoffs being a more flexible thing that just brightens up a bunch of the cube.
I think the payoffs and enablers is a key part of this discussion we'll come back to. I think you also have a ninjas theme. I mean, you have three ninjas, I believe. Just three ninjas, but one of the ninjas says for each other ninja you control, and then you have a couple of changelings. And so it's like, as we've said before on the show, if you've listened to us talk about the regular cube, or if you've played it, it's got this kind of very uneven texture to it, where it's like, there's different depths of all different kinds of things. And like, I truly feel like, I mean, when we roto drafted this cube last, which was a long time ago, I was like, I'm drafting the ninjas deck. Like, I think about it as like a like named theme, even though it's kind of just 3 cards. Similar to that, I think the recent example of Noyandar plus Planar Outburst, I also then noticed you also have Sylvan Advocate, Waker of the Wilds, Embodiment of Insight, and Emergent Sequence. Like, there is definitely a Bant Land Creatures Matter deck in there somewhere that I'm not sure anybody's ever put together.
Not until we saw it this last weekend at Lunchbox.
But has anyone ever paired Planar Outburst with Waker of the Wilds or Embodiment of Insight?
I've definitely seen the interaction more with creature lands, where it's like, oh, I want to like force you to block with your creature lands, so then second main phase I can cast, oh no, Planar Outburst destroys non-land creatures. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that specific interaction come up very much.
I've been looking at the list, I was like, I'm just going to force Bant land creatures next time, because I feel like none of these cards are individually high picks. Honestly, maybe Sylvan Advocate is the best card among them. Sylvan
Advocate has definitely done work with, oh man, my card memory's falling apart. Treetop Village, of course.
I mean, it's just a good card also. It's a 2-mana 2/3 with Vigilance. Like, it's just a strong baseline. But I feel like I could wheel almost all these cards and then maybe actually make Planar Outburst broken?
I'm excited for this. This is going to be great.
Don't tell anybody. Okay. If you're in our play group, don't listen to this. Remind me when this podcast is over. I don't want to tell the sickos, but I have an idea for an episode that's pretty funky.
Okay.
Don't ever forget to tell you.
Funky episode. I'll write that down on my notes. That's what the notes are for.
Are there other themes that come to mind for you in the regular cube that I have not touched on? Again, this is not a comprehensive list.
I mean, so I wrote down a list as well. My list looks more like this pile of spaghetti.
Okay, this is part of why this is the topic I wanted to talk about. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about this tool yet. Do you want to release this by Monday?
Yeah, this is a great, what do you call it? Accountability.
Okay,
force
great.
myself to release this thing. So I made this little app for mapping synergies between a cube, and you can just paste in a cube list and then select any card that is rendered as just like a bunch of points in space and connect that to other cards. I'm curious if this tool is useful for anybody at all, but
I think some people are going to go goo goo gaga over it.
Yeah, to be able to not just think about like, okay, here's my equipment theme, let me just type equipment and see how many equipments I have in my cube, but to more organically go through and say, okay, well, here's Swiftblade Vindicator, it does connect to this equipment, but it also connects to a thing that puts a counter on it, and then indirectly that connects to Baird, because Baird also cares about those, and you can build this big sort of force-directed, springy map of all the synergies in a cube.
You can also do it with, like, basically, Scryfall keyword searches. So you can say, like, attach this card to everything that has type equipment. You don't have to manually draw the connection between Swiftblade Vindicator and every card that has an equipment, but then it's all manually editable. So let's say you have an equipment that doesn't buff power, for example. You could then just get rid of that connection and say, like, that's not actually a connection, even though it does have type equipment.
Right.
Anyway, I requested that you make this because of the underlying thing, which is also what I want to talk about in this episode, which is I feel like I'm hitting a point in my Take 5 cube, which I don't want to go into too much detail here because it's just too much to explain, but I'm designing a new cube that I'm making YouTube videos about. If you want to sort of get caught up, you can go watch them, where I feel like I am trying to clown car style just fit so many themes into one little cube, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm hitting the limit of just how many themes can possibly fit in a cube, and that was sort of the reason why I was hoping to visualize it with this tool, which I think people are going to find very useful. What's the URL? Do you want to give them the URL?
I would just go to Lucky Paper, go to the resources page, and it'll be there.
Yeah.
Or it's at resources/card network.
And we will also link it in the show notes, obviously. So anyway, looking at your card network you made for the regular cube, are there themes that pop out visually to you that I have not called out already?
So it's been a bit since I looked at this. I think one that kind of stands out is enchantments, which is not necessarily something that I've really explicitly started to try to support, except for a few things here and there. Like you mentioned, there's sort of the curiosity theme, so an aura you're putting on your creature to draw cards, and I added Eutropia, the twice favored, which kind of like bleeds into that. It's like, cool, now I can, when I'm getting this enchantment, also jump my creature to be able to actually get damage through and be able to draw those cards. What else we got in here? I think the thing that stood out more...
Wait, what else do you have that pays off enchantments, or like is part of the enchantment package?
So we got Eutropia. We got more things in here. I need to make the labels easier to read is what I really need to do. Maybe it is just that. But I also discovered a new personal goal for playing the regular cube, which is I really want to put Squirrel Nest onto IV Gleeful Spell Thief. You just gotta animate your creature land and then cast your Squirrel Nest.
Wow.
Does that work? That might not work. It might just fall off.
Yeah, I think it says enchant land, right?
Okay, never mind. So it's going to be more difficult to make this goal happen.
It's still probably possible, but you would need to what's the green aura that makes your creature a forest land?
This is great. Great
You gotta
content.
do that first, and then you can put Squirrel Nest on Eutropia.
I'm not sure there was anything else that was super revelatory in terms of like, oh, this is a theme that I didn't intend or didn't expect. To me, the thing that surprised me is just how different those different kinds of themes felt when I started mapping them out. So specifically, it's like, okay, yeah, we have the heroic theme. There's like a collection of specific, pretty explicit cards. And then I have this huge, huge cluster over here that's just like stuff that cares about spells.
Yeah.
And what was surprising to me is how this feels incredibly out of balance. And yet we've played this cube a bunch and it doesn't feel that way. Like it feels pretty normal. And I think that it's just sort of highlighting this difference to me that some of those themes are just really, really broad, and something that cares about spells can care about a third of the cube that is instants and sorceries, and some of the cards that have these much more explicit interactions really do need specific cards to pair with them. I don't know, can you help me rationalize it all? Maybe it's just like every deck is going to want removal spells regardless, so even though there are more spells that can technically key off your Murmuring Mystic, those are going to be more evenly distributed throughout the drafters of the table is maybe kind of where I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think if your thing you care about, if you're like, enabler is, a card type or something that is going to have tons of incidental overlap with cards other decks want, then the theme seems more broad than it actually is, right? Because every other player is going to be fighting you for removal spells or just good instant sorceries that do pretty much anything. It's funny, when I think about like having a spell slinger theme, I almost, if I was drawing those lines, would say like, okay, the things that really are for like the Young Pyromancer and the Murmuring Mystic are like 1-mana cantrips.
Sure.
Those are the cards that like are fine in almost any deck to very good in almost any deck, but they're like incredible in your deck. The amount you can make that card better by building around it in your deck is so much greater than like, I don't know, what's your favorite 5-mana sorcery in your cube that's not a board wipe? Is there even one?
I'm not sure there is one.
Is there even one? You know, like any other like random expensive spell that, like a Rain of Revelation, right? Rain of Revelation is not that much better with Young Pyromancer or Murmuring Mystic. You go from a 4-mana spell that draws some cards to a 4-mana spell that draws some cards and makes a single 1/1. Compare that to a 1-mana spell that either just draws a card or draws a card and makes a 1/1, orders of magnitude, like more relative growth in power level. And so if I pack one, pick one to Young Pyromancer and regular cube and was getting like, 3 and 4 mana spells late, I wouldn't think, wow, my deck's open, right? But if I was wheeling all the 1-mana cantrips, I'd be like, this deck is open. So the amount to which you care about certain instants and sorceries really depends.
Yeah, I mean, something else, maybe we're just going to talk a lot about the limitations of this kind of mapping exercise, but because you can do what you described and say, I'm going to select Murmuring Mystic and then search, type instant, type sorcery, and just connect all, there seems to be some like really possibly misleading or possibly interesting connections between colors that I didn't expect. So there's a ton of green cards surrounding that cluster of spells matter payoffs. And I'm like, well, is this a mistake? Do you ever want to put Ambuscade in your deck with Young Pyromancer? Probably not, but maybe yes. Maybe there is like a green Spellslinger deck that could make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like a Rampant Growth is a great example of a spell that is like, I would almost actively consider not good for a Spellslinger deck. It's like, well, you want to cast this on the same turn you would otherwise want to cast your Young Pyromancer. So like, this is not a good sort of synergy with Young Pyromancer, even though it does ostensibly trigger the other one. And here's where also, like, this is probably a layer of detail around terminology that is not particularly productive, but...
No, let's do it. Let's do all the details of terminology.
In Take 5, very early on, I identified that I wanted to run Phyrexian Dreadnought. The cards that I really like for that cube, like, on vibes, are cards that have seemingly very big downsides, but can be made good in the right context, which is something I'm very much, inspired by Jane's The Ball Pit for. There are cards in The Ball Pit where you're like, well, this card's just awful. But again, when every card can also be a chromatic sphere, you occasionally find that this card that is otherwise, not very good, actually can be good in this spot. And the fact that I get to, or I'm forced rather, in that cube to play all my cards means that I get to like find those spots and sort of have that creative moment. So cards with like explicit big downsides or otherwise cards that kind of like do nothing are aesthetically very appealing to me for that cube. Like your Lion's Eye Diamonds, your Sundials of the Infinite, these cards where it's like, what does this card even do? And I think Phyrexian Dreadnought kind of falls into that category. It's like, what does this card even do? Now, if I just had Phyrexian Dreadnought and like some Stifles or whatever, I don't know that I would call that a package. That's kind of like one payoff with some enablers. And it's almost like a combo at that point because like the payoff also does nothing without the enablers, right? It's just kind of a nothing card. But I have also added to that cube cards like Leveler and Eater of Days, which are also undercosted, really big creatures with massive downsides on ETB. Leveler exiles your library, and Eater of Days makes you skip your next 2 turns. At that point, now I'm like, this is clearly a theme in a package, right? Like now there is, more than one card you could possibly get to pay off this strategy. And that's when it starts to feel much more like a theme to me. Like, I almost wonder if just having a well-supported Phyrexian Dreadnought in a cube is more like having opposition in a cube. Not really, because again, opposition works with all kinds of other cards. You don't have to like have build around it in any way. But I don't know, maybe the difference between like what feels like a combo versus what feels like a package is like the number of payoffs, right?
I wonder if we could just draw the line to, do you have enough support for a particular strategy that you're reliably seeing it in most of your games? And so I can say, like, this is my Stifle and big payoff deck, rather than just, I might end up doing this every once in a while, but mostly I'm just a control deck.
I was going to bring that up too. I think we've said before in the show, at least I've said that somewhere along the line, I got the idea that, 7 was like a good number for an effect that you like need to see most games for your deck to function, right? Thinking about aggressive 1-drops, thinking about spells for your Young Pyromancer or like Snapcaster Mage, right? Like if my card does not work unless I have this other class of card, or I really want to have at least one of this other class of card in every game, 7 is kind of like my like low end of like, that's how many I want in my deck. And I'm never going to have 7 Phyrexian Dreadnoughts in the cube under any circumstances.
I could think of one circumstance. You could just choose to do that.
I could just choose to do that. But for my goals for that cube, I'm never going to have 7 Phyrexian Dreadnoughts or cards like it because there aren't enough cards that are like it. And I am sticking to Singleton for that cube. Given that, it's like you have to figure out ways to make all these cards matter even when they're not in their sort of defined context. I think Baird and Utopia kind of fit into a very similar category for me too, where they're payoffs for so many things.
Sure, yeah.
That you have this really nice luxury of getting. It's almost like when you have like a really good hybrid card in your cube that like fits into multiple decks. It's like you get the Baird late and you are the equipment deck, or you're the +1/+1 counter deck, and you're like, great, here's my payoff. But that payoff was like a hybrid payoff. It was like a payoff for, not having to combine multiple themes, but for any one individual theme, which is kind of what Utopia does. You
mean hybrid not in terms of the mana symbols that are split. You mean hybrid in terms of just...
I was referring to like how a hybrid card is like,
Okay, so like often hybrid cards are used in that way in like a retail limited set where they just want to have glue cards that are more flexible.
Just being like, oh, I got my payoff from my mono blue deck sick, and it's actually a green blue hybrid card. You just don't care about the fact that it's green. You get Baird, you don't care about +1/+1 counters at all. Maybe your deck doesn't have any, it just has equipment, but you still got your payoff because that card can pay off multiple different things.
This is totally non sequitur or totally off topic, but is there some kind of like, I'm going to play cards that deal damage every turn and then protect myself with a bunch of weird enchantments and then play a bunch of Eater of Days just to give you enough turns to kill yourself?
That's a very cool idea.
I think
I'm taking notes over here.
Yeah, we just need like a bunch of spheres of safety and sulfuric vortices, and what's the Chrono Savant? Is that another way you can like skip a bunch of turns?
There's definitely a couple ways to skip some turns.
Chronotog. Just search Chrono and you'll get there.
I'm definitely taking notes for Take 5 on this.
So you're feeling curious about this question because you feel like in this cube you're designing, you're just like too jammed full. You can't fit any more in it.
Well, I'm still squishing more clowns into the car right now, and I haven't looked around back to see if any like clown blood and guts is coming out the other side. That's the best metaphor I can think of for this cube. Like, I'm still at the stage where I am adding new themes and new synergies with every cube update, and I have not playtested it properly. And so I do not know if these are all going to work or if it's just going to be like, we've got a potpourri of nonsense.
Do you have like a rough number of how many different synergies you're trying to fit in there right now?
Gosh, that would have been a really great thing for me to actually like go sit down and count out before this. I mean, we do have to answer the question at the end of this. I don't know.
Is it 10? Is it 20?
No, it's closer to probably like 2 or 3 dozen, I would say.
2 or 3. That is a lot.
Is probably like specific
and it's a
kind of themes.
360 card cube, or no, it's a weird number.
No, it's 360.
Okay, great.
That's the whole point. It's just 360, and you have to play all the cards you draft.
Right.
That's the whole thing. There's currently a lot of stuff going on, and we could talk about how you define a theme and like versus a package versus a combo versus a
the difference
deck.
Between like 3 and 10 and 30 is like rough ballparks that are going to feel very different. So like we don't have to be super precise.
I'm definitely of the same sort of attitude that you are with the regular cube, where nobody's going to be able to draft a deck that does one thing. Like everybody's deck is going to have multiple weird little packages in it where it's like, okay, I have both some Dreadnought stuff and some Sundial stuff, and those happen to work together. Sundial is a payoff for Dreadnought, or an enabler for Dreadnought rather. But you also then want a bunch of like, bounce lands in your Sundial deck, which don't have anything to do with Dreadnought. And then maybe you also want some flings, which have nothing to do with Sundial. But your deck is going to have to be doing multiple sort of weird combinations of things, or you're going to be I do have a big keyword matters, well, relatively big keyword matters, like Chromanticore and Soulflayer sort of deck there. And so like that deck is also a whole other package that could overlap with other things. You're going to have to be combining multiple things for sure into one deck to make that happen. So therefore, the bare minimum would be like, 16 would be not enough because I want everyone to have, 2 to 3 themes per deck. And so I would want at least 24. So we're probably talking, more like 24 to 36 themes and like packages that are going to be sitting in here.
So I have 2 questions about things that might affect the way you think about these packages. First one is, do you think about game speed as changing the way you think about themes? Because you're saying, okay, broadly speaking, maybe I can draw a benchmark of like number of cards I want in my deck before this feels like a theme. I feel like it's hard to come with that benchmark because if we're talking a very aggressive deck, if you're trying to end the game quickly with your theme, you just need more density so you can find that density of cards versus, the other end of the spectrum is like, I'm a hard combo control deck. I only have 1 copy of Kiki and 1 copy of Pestermite, but I'm just going to make the game go long enough that I will find them eventually. So are you thinking about game speed at all and how it gives you different ability to pack more clowns into this car?
I have not thought about game speed explicitly at all. I will say that nothing I have right now resembles an aggro deck in the traditional sense at all. And so I would expect currently the game speed would be fairly slow with a lot of possibility for explosive sequences out of certain decks that could end games in a short time period once they like found their thing. But to my sort of 7-card heuristic, that rule of thumb, I don't expect any of these themes to have enough like support for that to be your deck's theme, right? Which is kind of what I was getting at with the regular cube, right?
Interesting, yeah.
Like if you have the best zombie deck in the regular cube, you maybe have 7 or 8 zombies, right? Like you maybe are sort of barely clearing the bar from my rule of thumb, and that's maybe one of your most deeply supported themes in that cube. Because your whole thing is you don't want people to be able to sit down and very often draft the zombie deck. That's like not a thing you want. You want them to have a like, black-green deck with a little zombie sort of sub-synergy, like a little bit of like spice of zombies in there, but not like your whole deck.
A soupçon of zombie.
I don't expect to ever have 7 of anything in any of these decks because I don't want anyone's deck to be that focused. I want you to be like, well, okay, I drew 2 halves of 2 different packages, and like, how can I combine these to like make something interesting happen, right? That's sort of what that cube is all about, wanting you to combine weird cards in funky ways. And so I explicitly don't want any of the themes to be that deep, which does allow for more space, I think, because, I think a lot of the games are going to go until you can find a synergy, whether it is, capital S, one of the ones I like planned for, like, you got to exile Chromanticore with Soulflare, or whether you just combine some other cards in a funky way that I have not anticipated, which I'm hoping there'll be a lot of that in this cube.
Sure.
Or you just curve out with creatures that have keyword text that you don't care about, and you're like, well, I'm going to play a 2-drop and a 3-drop, and your deck is super janky and can't do anything, so I'm just going to attack you.
That ties into my other question, which is, I feel like very often Cube Designer will lay out sort of a very specific thematic structure, and then when you actually draft it, players just kind of like drive sideways over it. It's like, you said that there's a +1/+1 counters theme in Selesnya, but actually I just took the best +1/+1 counter card and the best equipment card, and this is just like a creature with a great rate, and I just drafted those and have a deck that doesn't...
my vehicle payoff.
Exactly, and it's like, I didn't really lean into any of your specific themes. I just drafted the best cards. Do you think that like dissonance is something that's worth considering, or do you think that's just kind of fine?
I think that's the goal. Like that is what I love about cube design. I don't want people to be just drafting what I expect them to draft. I want them to be finding new things that I didn't even think about in all my cubes, especially a cube like Take 5, which is all about weird card combinations and stuff.
If that's the part that's exciting, then does that devalue the exercise of coming up with a specific thematic structure, or do you think it's still just sort of like useful as either a mental exercise, a framework for the cube designer, or as a expository tool just to like give players something to hold on to if they're not like at that level of evaluating rate to figure out like, how do I just break those and just pick the best cards?
I think even though what I explicitly want is players to do the unexpected, I think that is still going to be probably mostly an edge case. Like, I think if I were to look at someone's deck build, I like maybe 3/4 of the cards would be like, I expect these cards to play together. And then a quarter of them I'd be like, wow, I didn't really expect that. I wonder what's going to happen there. And I do think that while I want people to combine cards in unanticipated ways, I also think I should strive to anticipate as many of the ways as possible people are going to combine cards, right? Like, I'm not going in blindly and just, oops, I seeded a 2-card combo I didn't realize was in there. Like, I have Kiki Jiki in Take 5, for example, because I think it's just a very cool card. And there's actually one of my favorite little themes is a token copy theme. Like, I have a little tiny populate theme, and then a fair number of ways to make tokens of copies of creatures, which are generally speaking much higher value tokens than like a random 1/1 token you would get from like a young pyromancer, thus making all the populate cards like way cooler. Kiki Jiki's in there for those reasons. That means I am very consciously excluding any card that goes infinite with Kiki Jiki as a 2-card combo, because I think there's my responsibility as a cube designer to like have tried to think about all the sort of, possible ways players are going to use cards while acknowledging that I can't possibly think of all of them. And it actually wouldn't be ideal if I could, but I should try. I think that the trying is where the cube design comes in. And so I don't want someone to take a card and then feel like they didn't, get there with it and then ask me at the end of the draft, what am I supposed to do with this? And me to go, I don't know, I want you to figure it out. Like, I want to have an answer for them. Like, well, here's what I was thinking. This is where I want this card to sort of, shine, or here's the context I think in which it really works, and you just weren't that deck or whatever.
I mean, there is the Commander Spellbook website, which is just a huge catalog of combos that people have like manually assembled together. Yeah. And I think that if you're in that position as a cube designer where you're like, I don't want to accidentally step into a combo here, you can put your list in here.
That is what I use that for. I think that's the most useful way as a cube designer to use that tool, is just to be like, did I do any accidental infinite combos that are too good? Because I often wish that tool was... I mean, obviously, it would be a huge amount of work, but I wish that tool was more broad, because it pretty much only covers things that have an infinite outlet, right? Like, it doesn't include a really powerful synergy.
Oh, sure.
Like you will not find Dark Depths Thespian Stage in that combo list, because I don't think you will, at least. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, because I think basically the payoffs all have to be like infinite mana, infinite spell cast, infinite storm, infinite, creature tokens, or infinite damage, right? Like, the payoffs all have to be this kind of infinite something.
There is a combo with Dark Depths and Vampire Hex Mage, but then you also need Mael's Aria to win the game, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know, Commander's weird.
Something that makes infinite something. Wait, isn't Mael's Aria just the one that tutors the thing every turn? What is that?
Who can say? It's got too much text.
Okay, we're not going to read it. So anyway, I, as a cube designer, often wish that, which is kind of this tool you built, is I hope going to a manual allow people to do in their cubes, is like be able to say, okay, why did I put this card in this cube? I can't quite remember like what this is all touching. Or if you're looking for cuts, to be able to like look at a map of your cube and be like, where are the cards that actually aren't contributing to any of the things that I want? That gets to some of my sort of suggestions for how to get more themes into a cube as someone who has been greasing up clowns and, wedging them into a car door with a shoehorn for a while on the Take 5 cube. One of the things you can do definitely is try and have as many overlapping enablers as possible. The more your enablers overlap, the more you can have very distinct feeling themes and packages with relatively few cards. That's a great thing to focus on. I also think, your cube is going to need, unless you have really sort of off the beaten path goals, you're going to want to have a certain amount of removal, a certain amount of card draw, a certain amount of 2 mana value creatures, like, creatures that are lower on the curve, and as much as possible trying to use thematic cards that are part of packages that also check off other boxes so that you're also getting some of the removal you need in the cube, but the removal is now also touching on a theme. Like your classic, like I love Bone Shards, one of the greatest, most beautiful card designs of all time, because it cares about sacrificing, it cares about discarding, and it's also just a 1 mana removal spell that even if you are not explicitly benefiting from sacrificing or discarding, you will still very happily play in almost any cube. Having cards like Bone Shards is great. And in this cube, for example, I have Saw in half because I just talked about the weird creature token populate synergy, right?
And imagine making 2 Eater of Days and now you get to skip 4 turns.
I mean, genuinely, that will happen when your opponent has the Saw in half and you have the Eater of Days you just cheated into play, and then they Saw in half for Eater of Days, and then they get to take 4 turns.
Oh, I like that. I actually like that version better.
I expect to get some groans about that version. Like, I jumped through some hoops to make a Eater of Days, and then my opponent took 4 extra turns with the removal spell. I'll be like, yeah, well, get good, skill issue. Anyway, so as much as possible, you're trying to make sure that the synergistic thematic cards are also ticking boxes of high level effects that you need to have in the cube. I think also really helps. I expect at the end of this cube design process for Take 5, there will be 0 generic bread and butter cards that do not have some tie-in with a theme. There will be no just Doomblades, no just Ponders, or, Rampant Growths. All the ramp and card draw and removal is going to have some thematic tie-in.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I was actually just looking, as you were explaining that, through kind of the orphaned cards in my map, and all the things are just like floating around the edges that aren't connected to anything. I wonder if this is another limitation to this way of thinking, is I don't think it's always better or more correct to make sure that everything has as many thematic tie-ins as possible. There's so many cards here, it's just like Canker Bloom. I love that card. It's just like flexible. It goes into the aggressive green deck. It's a removal spell.
Would you not put Cankerbloom? Proliferate is one of the modes, right? Would you not say that ties into all the +1/+1 counter cards?
I don't know. I guess I'm just looking at a lot of these cards and thinking, like Kitesail Freebooters may be a better example.
Great
it's
example.
Like, this card doesn't key into anything. It's just like got a nice texture. It like puts a little pressure on your opponent with a flyer. I guess maybe we could stretch it and say it works with equipment. But
I was going to say that, but really a stretch.
I'm not looking at those and thinking, oh, these are cards that are out of place. I think those are cards that just don't necessarily interact in an explicit way, but are still totally good game pieces, and I think make this cube work. So I think that you're in a unique position designing this cube that is explicitly about creating this kind of like mousetrap gameplay, this like Rube Goldberg machine,
yeah.
And that is like the thing you're trying to optimize for. I don't think that every cube designer should go out and say like, not. Okay, let me go cut every disconnected card and make sure that everything is like as, entrenched and entangled and connected as possible.
No, and that was my sort of response to, if you are trying to get more themes in, that is one of the ways to do it. But I'm certainly not suggesting you should try and get more themes in. And by contrast, this is something I basically have not thought about at all in Sacred Geometry. Like, that is a cube that is chock full of cards that I think don't have any real mechanical tie-ins to other cards. They're just clean elven cards that stand on their own. Now, obviously, Magic is a game with a ton of just mechanical overlapping synergy. Like, yes, Absorb is a perfectly clean card, and yes, there is like 2 life gain matters angels in the cube, and so like you could play out your Archangel of Thune and then hold up Absorb to protect it and then put a +1/+1 counter on your whole board. And like, yeah, that's cool, but you're almost never optimizing for that in that cube. Like, by comparison to Take 5, you were pretty much taking good cards in that cube and trying to focus on your macro strategy of just like deck speed and very broad game plan and not really thinking about synergistic packages, with a few small exceptions. Like there is like a Drakehaven deck, and there you might take a Drakehaven and like kind of build around it. But for the most part, it's like not stuff like that in that cube. So I'm certainly not saying that like this is a like better way to design a cube. And actually, I think it's kind of interesting. I feel like a lot of times my cube designs are subconsciously direct responses to my other cube designs. And I spent the last like maybe 2 years working on Sacred Geometry, and then find myself working on Take 5, where it's like, now the other thing that's completely extreme. Now, instead of being about individual card elegance, it's about all the cards are crazy and they don't make any sense. And instead of like not really caring about the synergies or having them be totally emergent, I'm going to like hyperfixate on having as many overlapping synergistic packages as possible just to see what that difference of texture is like.
Yeah, I mean, you like to swing for the fences.
I just feel like it's so much easier as a design tool to swing for the fences,
Sure, just do the thing the most extreme.
Not even that. It's like, if you can clearly define your goals, then the closer you can adhere to them, you could describe that as a kind of extremity, right? Like, I don't think Sacred Geometry is a very extreme cube, but
the goals are extreme in a certain way.
Well, it's just that I try to adhere quite aggressively to my stated goals, which are pretty not extreme goals. It's like, just play simple cards, play elegant cards. Like, it's kind of a very boring down the middle goal, but by adhering to it pretty strictly and finding yourself playing cards like Volshock Morningstar, where you're like, yeah, that actually is really elegant. Like, it's not a card that like has a lot of appeal, but every number on it is 2, and that's very elegant. You end up like learning something about like really committing to the design process that way, I find.
I think something else that I'm finding useful about this sort of synergy mapping exercise is the fact that I'm mapping out cards in a specific context. So I might go and look at just, here's the Scryfall Tagger, which is another very useful thing to learn about types of synergies. And it might be like, okay, well, in this cube, Kitesail Freebooter is a really important part because it is connected to this huge humans matter theme, and that's going to like bring it into this network, whereas in regular cube, that's just not a thing. And the same might be true of, here's this card that cares very explicitly about +1/+1 counters. Maybe in a vacuum, if I look at that and say like, okay, that is a synergistic component of this card, but maybe in this cube it doesn't really matter at all. So discovering those things that are synergistic or not within the specific scope, I think, is useful.
I'm sure you have not been watching the Take 5 videos. You don't watch YouTube at all. And why would you watch me, the person you talk to all the time every day, talk about Magic on a video?
I'm sorry I don't watch YouTube.
No, you should. Well, you should be sorry you don't watch YouTube generally, because there's so much great stuff on there, but you should definitely not watch those videos. There's so many interesting things about Take 5 that I feel like have been emerging. Shout out to Silent Statement, who is a user that's been really invested in offering suggestions. This is a cube, actually, that, kind of a full circle moment. It's not what I set out to do, but I ended up making a cube, Anthony, that supports Goblin Charbelcher really well. It is a good Goblin Charbelcher cube and has the amount of support that I feel is appropriate for Goblin Charbelcher. You may remember we did the emergent cube design episode on Goblin Charbelcher a long time ago.
I remember it well. I remember. Grenzo Dungeon Warden. I'm still excited about that idea.
Oh, wait. I gotta put Grenzo Dungeon Warden in Take 5. Is it Grenzo? What are you thinking of?
I don't know.
I'd have to go back and listen to that episode and see what you're referring back to, because I don't remember. I can look at the cards mentioned page and figure it out. But either way, it's the kind of examples of like cool synergies I'm excited about is like, it's a good Goblin Charbelcher cube, partially because I've included a ton of the modal double face lands. Like, I have no other modal double face cards, but I have a lot of the lands in there, which is actually, interestingly, because it's a desert cube and you have to draft all your lands, that was a really good way for me to just get more bread and butter effects in there. Like a removal spell that's also a land, great. A card draw spell that's also a land, great. That just allowed me to like kind of cover my bases and like add a removal density. Like, it solved a big high level problem with the cube that then just let me say like, oh, you know what? Goblin Charbelcher also makes that very cool. The card that I'm so excited about the connection to, recommended by Silent Statement, is Ruin Ghost. Do you know Ruin Ghost?
I do not.
It's a 1 and a white for a 1/2, maybe a 1/1 from Rise of the Eldrazi, maybe Zendikar Rising. Worldwake. It lets you tap it to exile a land you control and return to the battlefield. It's like a landfall trigger from the landfall set.
Okay, so we're going to turn Ivy into a land. She's going to have a squirrel nest. We're going to blink her. What are we doing
Something's
here?
happening.
Something's happening.
What it lets you do is any of the MDFCs that are permanents on the backside, or permanents on the front side, rather, you just get to play them as a land and then flip them with Ruin Ghost.
What happens if they're a spell on the front side?
I think they just go to the graveyard and nothing happens. You definitely don't cast it, and a spell can't be on the battlefield, so I think it just, as a state-based action, is like, I'm gone now. poof.
The game doesn't make sense with me here. I'm going away.
There's going to be a lot of rules questions about this cube the first couple times it gets drafted, and I'm going to have to do my research to like maybe have answers to some of the most common ones. But anyway, the fact that like this is what that sort of cube mapping tool that you built allowed me to do was see that like Ruin Ghost and Goblin Charbelcher are actually very closely connected. Like they are very often going to end up in the same deck, I think. And it's not because they have anything to do with each other, because they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Zero, on the face mechanical connection, except they happen to go through this same intermediary. This same sort of spell happens to enable both. I am seeking in this cube to do as much of that as possible, like have cards that are enablers for wildly different things.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that this exercise is useful for, is those like second order connections, where again, you can go on Scryfall, you can go in the combo lookup thing and find those first level connections and first level synergies, but then discovering that, oh yeah, these two cards that seem disparate actually have like a common shared enabler that's like makes them make sense together.
Yeah, and especially when those enablers don't make sense with each other necessarily. Like, they can also just be completely separate things. And in the case of Ruin Ghost, I'm also just, to be honest, thrilled that it's a 2-mana creature, because with my incredible focus on like weird packages and themes, I don't like the curve in this cube right now. The curve is really like 3 and 4 drop heavy, and I'm just like, I want people to be able to play something on 2. So I'm really excited about that. Ruin Ghost, also sick art. It's just like my new favorite card right now. I'm really excited about Ruin Ghost.
Are you worried about people just being like, here's Oswald Fiddlebender, and I'm going to attack you with it 10 times?
No, I want that to happen.
It. Okay, great.
I explicitly, like, it's hard to articulate my goals for this cube because I want it to both be a place where you can do really sweet, weird, synergistic stuff, and also a deeply janky gameplay experience. Like, I want this to be janky Magic where you're like playing morphs that are completely off color just because you need a 3-mana 2/2. Like, I want that to be a like defining feature of the cube. That's part of under supporting all this stuff, is that if your deck is hyper consistent in charbelching your opponent, then it's not an environment where you can just attack with Oswald Fiddlebender or a off color morph. And I want that to be a perfectly viable strategy in a lot of games.
I like this Ruin Ghost and Retreat to Coral Helm combo.
Yeah.
You can do that forever if you want.
You looked that up on the Commander spellbook?
Yeah, and then what do you do? What do you do with infinite landfall triggers? I just don't know.
You of all people know what to do with infinite landfall triggers.
Rampaging Baloths.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, great.
Yeah, for sure. Rampaging Baloths, or the one desert that deals the damage to your opponent when ETBs. I guess we have dual lanes now that deal damage to your opponent when they ETB. That makes that way more viable.
But they enter tapped, right? So it wouldn't actually work for this combo?
Bubby boo bubble bubble boo ba.
All right, where's your is it Amulet of Vigor that untaps your lands?
Yeah, I guess it would have to be a white producing land that comes in untapped. I actually do have Tiller Engine, and I'm planning on putting Amulet of Vigor in this cube because...
Why not? It's a weird janky card.
Well, yeah, and also, Amulet of Vigor is a great example of, like, this card doesn't do anything. And, like, I like the cards you look at and you go, this card doesn't do anything, and then you can, like, figure out a way to make it useful. But I have all the bounce lands here, obviously, because they're, like, great with MDFCs, and they're great with Sundial. And being able to have those come in untapped is, I think, a big bonus.
Every time you say Sundial, I'm like, what does a 2-mana 3/3 have to do with this? But no, it's the end of the turn Sundial.
Yeah, the end of the turn. Oh, so beautiful. Did I show you the foil? It looks so good. I bought a couple little foils just to keep myself motivated.
A little topic with a couple little foils.
Look at this. Look at this. It's gorgeous.
That is a nice foil.
Oh, it's so good.
So did we answer the question? How many themes can you fit in a cube?
I think... if it's more than 4 dozen, leave a comment below and tell me what your more than 4 dozen themes are in your cube. And here's what I'll say too. You can't just cheat by adding more cards and saying you support more themes.
That's actually, another great point to bring up is that I think some people, I've definitely seen people fall into this trap of saying, well, I have 10 themes in my cube. I'm going to up it from 360 to 540, and that means I get to add whatever the fraction is. I get to add 4 more themes to my cube, and it's like, well, I see what you did there. However, if you're still only drafting 360 of those cards at a time, players are just going to see more cards for more different themes, and the 10 that were there at the beginning are not going to be as functional. So,
which I would describe as a task failed successfully moment, because I would like the cube much more that has more themes that are less supported, but don't kid yourself about not having diluted the other themes.
Yeah. And which also goes the other way. If you want to have 14 more smaller themes in your 360 card cube, you can just do that without increasing the size.
Though obviously, the main value of increasing size is that you can increase diversity of what those payoffs are for that theme. If you end up trying, like as I am trying to do, if you end up trying to jam 4 dozen themes or packages into a 360 card cube, a lot of those themes or packages are going to be 3 cards, and it's going to be the same payoff every time. And maybe that starts to feel less dynamic to you than not quite knowing what your payoff is going to be for your, negative ETB theme.
I thought I had a question for you. I have 2 questions. When do we get to play this cube? Why is Dreamscape Artist cuttable? That doesn't seem reasonable.
I currently have all the things that care about basic land types or basic land specifically, as marked as cuttable, because in all my test drafts, I have found that it is harder than I want it to be to get enough basic lands to make those work. And I have only done bot test drafts, but anyway, that's why.
I do like the idea of having some cards that add some more texture to make, because this is a desert cube, right?
It is.
To make the basic lands feel even more important than they already do in a desert cube. If you're going to make me play blue, at least let me cast Harrow every turn.
At least let me play a green card, basically. When can we play this cube? Alex suggested that 5/5 is a Tuesday. And so maybe May 5th is when I have to have a version of this cube ready. It will probably be largely proxied at that point, because I will not be confident enough to have purchased a bunch of cards. But I already got some cards. I think I have like 80 cards there that I already owned, or I bought like 6 other cards because I really wanted to look at them and feel inspired.
Just a little more clown grease and we'll fit the rest of those cards on that pile.
Just a little more. Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited about this list. And also, every time I sit down to like do some cube design on it and make a video, I'm overwhelmed at how many more ideas for videos and cube design themes I have to add in here. But I'm just really excited to play Leveler with Endless Whispers and then sacrifice it, thus giving my opponent a Leveler, and then they exile their library and then they take their turn and die, and then also put a Leveler in my Laboratory Maniac deck and exile my own library with Laboratory Maniac, and then also put a Leveler in my deck where I'm just going to end the turn with that trigger on the stack and get a 5-mana 10/10, which is not even that good. It has no evasion. It's just a 5-mana 10/10.
They're going to have to block with their Oswald Fiddlebender. They don't have a choice.
They're just going to block with Ruin Ghost and then Oswald Fiddlebender and then all their other synergistic cards.
And then turn Ruin Ghost into a land so that they can blink their own Ruin Ghost so that they can then keep blinking it forever. And infinite blocker.
Wait, should I put the aura that turns things into lands?
Look, I only want to do one thing, and it's turn things into lands.
Well, to answer the question, I don't know, maybe. I think this is an interesting conversation about what it means to have a package or a theme in a cube, and how to, if you want to add more, or the reasons why you might not want to add more. You might want to keep that number relatively low. I think we're both on record, Anthony, of being fans of more small packages that you can then, as a player in the draft, choose how to dynamically combine. Whereas the bigger packages, the sort of deeper support for decks, sometimes feels a little closer to being on rails, which is, frankly, terminology I don't like, because I think even when you are like quote unquote on rails in a draft, there are still tons of interesting decisions, right? Like even if you're locked into red-white tokens, you still have to decide between a like A- payoff and like the first really good removal spell for you in pack 2, right? Like it's not completely rote. But if you are concerned about that kind of thing, I think that more sub packages and smaller themes can lead to more dynamic draft experience than bigger, deeper themes.
I agree. And I'm curious if this tool ends up being useful to people, this synergy mapper. Yeah, you just plug in your cube list and start making connections and see if you learn anything.
It's been really useful for me. And I think it's basically, I mean, there's tons of little
it's
opportunities.
It's a little bit of a difficult user interface to make sense, just because the like connecting many to many is a little bit of a weird thing, but I think it's important.
Importantly, this is only a tool for the sickest of sickos.
Yeah,
and
if you're not a sick sicko, don't worry about it.
I can think of a few people out there that are going to sit down and have a good few hours with this tool and go full sicko mode. And
you want to name them? You want to name the sickest sickos?
Nah.
Okay.
I don't need to call them out. They know who they are. If you're listening, you know who you are. If you got really excited by the idea of a network graphing tool for all the connections between synergies of cards in your cube, so you can look at a big map and maybe learn 2 things. But I don't know. I'm such a visual person. It is really helpful for me to like identify cuts and like maybe see where something is over supported. And, you know, like I still want Phyrexian Dreadnought to be a bad kind of card in this cube. Like I don't want you to, every time you get a Phyrexian Dreadnought, always draw like 2 different ways to like pay off of it, you know? Verol's the Scar Striped.
Many people are saying this.
Many people are saying Verol's the Scar Striped.
It's funny how often in my life I've ended up building force-directed graphs compared to how I think that they're not like the best visualization tool in so many ways, but they're fun to play with.
What do you prefer for information like this?
A list.
A list?
A story. I don't know.
You prefer someone to write an epic poem about the synergistic packages in your cube and then
I don't
read
think
it
that
to you?
we talk enough as a society about using epic poetry as a mode of visualizing data.
Speak your truth. He's spitting here on this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. And on that bombshell, we're going to close this episode out. Thank you all for tuning in. You can support this show on Patreon if you want, and if you're going to be at any of these upcoming Cube events, we will see you there. I'll be at Cube for a Cause in New York, actually, before this episode comes out, so scratch that. I didn't think about the timelines. And we'll both be at Shoebox in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I believe there are still passes for sale for that event. It's going to be Cube as well as CEDH, Pauper, Team Limited, Pre-Modern, just all the great sort of fun, casual formats. Nick Floyd of Dan Dan fame is going to be there playing Dan Dan. There's going to be lots of cool artists doing alters and stuff. And they are like, honestly, one of the most cool things about this event in terms of like unique decisions is the community artists group. Because it's not, for the most part, like magic artists. It's like people that make cool proxies, people that do, you know, alters of cards. It's like, you know, the sort of grassroots community artists that are going to be present here.
Yeah, that's super cool, and something that you're not going to see at other Magic events. So
you are not going to see that at a
unique
Magic Con anytime soon. So yeah, check out Shoebox, and there are more events coming. I know the events page looks a little Spartan right now, and you might be asking yourself, is the Cube scene dying? And I can tell you, no, it is not. Tons of people are just not quite locked in on their dates yet, and I'm like, come on.
Scheduling is hard.
It is hard. Scheduling is very hard, but there's a lot of Cube events coming down the lane, and so hopefully we'll see one of those in the future.
If I could shout out one more housekeeping thing, I also just built another little app that I don't think we've talked about, and it's extremely simple. You paste in a list of magic cards, and it spell checks them. It's just a tool that I've needed for a long time, and I had some like command line tools to do kind of an okay job of it, but I realized that just building a full interface would be a lot better. It's been super useful to me whenever I like have a deck picture and I want to type up the card list, but then I need to plug it into something that actually needs the names to be exact, or for the podcast notes. So, if you have a hand-typed list of card names and it is not happy with the misspellings, this is the tool for you. Go find it, use it, and enjoy it.
Acquire Lucky Paper for this technology for a small price of...
Bleep It's just, you know, whatever your favorite card
actually,
purveyor.
Matthew, definitely bleep that. I don't want them to know. But if you want to acquire us, cool, 10 million, and you can have the spell checker. Seem fair?
I don't know. I really like the spell checker. I kind of want to keep it.
And on that bombshell... That's the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. Thank you for tuning in. All the music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty, and the show is edited by Matthew. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast, and this podcast is produced by Thinking Really Hard About Magic Cards and speaking into microphones about it. Anthony, thank you for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you, as always, for talking about a weird data visualization tool.
I'm really hyper-fixated on my metaphor of just cramming clowns into a car to the point that the clowns at the back are becoming squished and dying.
Yeah.
And I'm just still at the door side, just crushing them in there. They're screaming. I don't want to be fixated on it.
Grim.
My brain is just doing that.
Grim.